The whisper of the Wendigo. The wind cuts through the trees like 1,000 whispering voices. The sky is an empty void, smothered by thick clouds, and the ground beneath your feet is frozen solid. You don't know how long you've been walking. Only that the deeper you go, the quieter the forest becomes, until you hear it. A faint, rasping breath. Close, too close. The trees are still, yet something is watching. It moves just out of sight, circling. Then, a distant, distorted cry, half human, half beast, echoes through the darkness. You are not alone in these woods. For centuries, there have been stories, whispers among the indigenous tribes of North America, of something lurking in the coldest, most desolate places. A creature neither fully dead nor alive, a being cursed with an insatiable hunger, doomed to stalk the forests forever in search of its next victim. They call it the Wendigo. More than just a monster of folklore, the Wendigo is a warning, a symbol of starvation, isolation, and the dark corners of the human mind where madness and hunger intertwine. Some say it is a legend meant to scare people into obeying their traditions. Others believe it is something far more real, a predator that still lingers in the untouched wilds, watching, waiting, hungry. The unforgiving winter, a place for monsters. Imagine the dead of winter. The land is blanketed in snow, the rivers frozen solid. The cold gnaws at your flesh, and the hunger deep in your gut twists like a knife. You haven't eaten in days. Your body is weak. Your mind slipping. Every shadow in the trees looks like something moving, something lurking, and then a thought crosses your mind, one that feels foreign, intrusive, but undeniable. A hunger beyond survival, a craving for something unnatural. The Wendigo does not simply hunt the desperate, it becomes them. The first sightings, a horror passed down through generations, long before European settlers arrived. The Algonquian-speaking tribes, such as the Cree, the Ojibwe, and the Innu, warned of a creature that roamed the forests during the cruelest winters. A skeletal figure with hollow eyes and rotting flesh stretched over bones as sharp as blades. A creature that was once human, but had become something else. Something cursed. The Wendigo is not just a beast. It is a punishment, a fate worse than death, and those who encounter it rarely live to tell the tale. The journey ahead. In this exploration of the Wendigo, we will trace its origins in ancient folklore, examine horrifying real-life cases, and venture into the disturbing psychology behind Wendigo psychosis, a rare but chilling condition where individuals believe they are transforming into the monster itself. We will explore modern encounters, examine the evidence, and ask the question, could the Wendigo still be out there? And more importantly, if you were lost in the cold, starving, and desperate, could you become one? Origins of the Wendigo myth. The Wendigo legend is one of the oldest and most terrifying stories in North America, passed down through generations of indigenous tribes. To the Algonquian-speaking peoples, the Wendigo was more than just a cautionary tale. It was a warning, a force of nature that punished those who gave in to greed, desperation, and the ultimate taboo, cannibalism. A creature born from starvation and sin, the harsh winters of North America were unforgiving. Food was scarce, the cold was relentless, and survival often came down to impossible choices. In these desolate conditions, starvation drove people to desperate acts. Some took more than their fair share, hoarding supplies while others suffered. Some, when pushed to the brink, did the unthinkable, consuming the flesh of their own kind, and that is where the Wendigo comes in. According to legend, when a person commits the ultimate sin of eating human flesh, they are cursed. A darkness seeps into their soul, twisting them into something no longer human. They grow taller, thinner, their skin stretched tight over their bones, their hunger never satisfied. Their mind is no longer their own, consumed by a single insatiable desire to eat more. No matter how much they consume, they remain starving, trapped in a cycle of endless hunger. But the Wendigo is not just a punishment for cannibalism. Some versions of the legend say that it can also be born from greed itself. A person who takes too much, who allows their selfishness to consume them, may find themselves transforming into a Wendigo, their body changing to match their gluttonous soul. The many names of the Wendigo. The Wendigo is not a single legend, but a presence in many indigenous cultures across North America. Though the name varies from tribe to tribe, the core idea remains the same: a cursed, monstrous being that represents hunger, greed, and the consequences of losing one's humanity. The Ojibwe call it Wendigo. The Cree refer to it as Wendigo. The Innu know it as Chano. In some traditions, it is linked to an evil spirit that takes over the body, while in others, it is a physical creature that lurks in the woods, hunting the lost and desperate. Despite the variations, all versions of the Wendigo share the same terrifying traits. It is a hunter of men, an eater of flesh, and a creature of endless hunger, a guardian of morality or a real monster. To the indigenous people who told these stories, the Wendigo was more than just a supernatural being. It was a way to enforce social rules and ensure the survival of the tribe. The winters were long and brutal. If someone stole food from their people, hoarded supplies, or even considered eating human flesh, the Wendigo legend served as a deterrent. It reminded them of the consequences of selfishness, of turning against the community. But some believe the Wendigo was more than just a myth. For centuries, people have claimed to see something lurking in the woods, something with hollow eyes and stretched skin, something that moves too fast for any human. There are accounts of people going missing in the dead of winter, their bodies never found, and those who return are never quite the same. Was the Wendigo just a story meant to keep people in line, or was it something more, something real? The legend continues. Even today, the Wendigo legend persists. Stories of hikers disappearing in the woods, hunters encountering something unnatural, and people experiencing sudden, unexplained hunger in the dead of winter continue to surface. Some say the Wendigo is still out there, waiting for its next victim. And in the deep, frozen forests of North America, where the wind howls through the trees and the cold gnaws at your skin, it is easy to believe that something is watching. The Wendigo's physical description and supernatural abilities. The Wendigo is a creature born from hunger, cursed to roam the frozen wilderness in search of human flesh. Its form is a terrifying reflection of its insatiable appetite, starved, monstrous, and unnatural. But despite its emaciated appearance, the Wendigo is far from weak. It is a relentless predator, moving through the snow-covered forests with unnatural speed and strength, a body devoured by hunger. Those who claim to have seen the Wendigo describe it in different ways, but certain features remain consistent. Its body is skeletal, with skin stretched so tightly over its bones that it appears to be rotting. Its ribs protrude through its chest, and its limbs are elongated and unnatural, ending in clawed fingers that can tear through flesh with ease. Its eyes are sunken, glowing with an eerie light, and its mouth is filled with jagged teeth that never stop chewing, never stop tearing, never stop consuming. Despite its thin and withered frame, the Wendigo is impossibly strong. It can snap bones like twigs, overpower the strongest of prey, and drag victims deep into the forest where their screams are swallowed by the wind. Some legends say the Wendigo grows with every person it eats, stretching taller and thinner, its hunger only increasing. No matter how much it consumes, it is never full. The beast with antlers.
While traditional descriptions of the Wendigo paint it as a skeletal humanoid, modern depictions often give it the head of a stag, complete with massive, twisting antlers. This version is more animalistic, blending elements of a spirit of the wild with the haunting presence of an undead predator. The antlered Wendigo is most commonly seen in horror films, video games, and modern storytelling, but it is not part of the earliest indigenous descriptions. Instead, it may be a visual evolution of the legend, a way to make the creature even more unsettling to modern audiences. But whether antlered or not, one thing remains certain. When the Wendigo is near, you will feel it before you see it.
A hunter that cannot be escaped. The Wendigo is not a mindless beast. It is a predator that stalks its prey with intelligence and patience. It does not rush. It waits. It watches. It chooses the right moment to strike, ensuring that its victim is weak, alone, and utterly helpless. Those who have encountered the Wendigo say that they first felt a strange unease, an overwhelming sense that they were being watched. Then came the whispers, a voice, distant at first, calling their name from the darkness. Sometimes it sounded like a loved one, other times like a child crying for help. The Wendigo does not need to chase its prey. It lures them deeper into the woods, away from safety, until there is no turning back. And once you see it, it is already too late. The cursed hunger. The most terrifying ability of the Wendigo is its curse. Some believe that simply encountering a Wendigo is enough to infect the soul. Those who come too close may begin to experience unnatural cravings, a deep and growing hunger that no normal food can satisfy. They will begin to withdraw from others, their thoughts consumed by dark urges. And then, one day, they will hear the Wendigo's voice whispering to them, and they will know that they are becoming one, a creature of endless winter. The Wendigo is not bound by time or place. It does not age, does not die of natural causes, does not rest. It is eternal, a creature of hunger that exists beyond the realm of men. Some believe that it is a spirit, slipping between worlds, moving through the frozen forests like a shadow. Others think it is something far worse, something that was once human, but has become something beyond understanding. The only thing that is certain is this: when the cold sets in, and the wind carries whispers through the trees, the Wendigo is near, and it is always, always hungry. Real-life Wendigo encounters and true horror stories. The Wendigo is often dismissed as just another legend, a cautionary tale told around campfires to ward off greed and cannibalism. But history tells a different story. There are those who claim the Wendigo is real, that it has been seen, heard, and even felt by those who dared venture too deep into the frozen wilderness. And some of these encounters are backed by terrifying historical evidence. The Wendigo psychosis of Swift Runner, 1878. One of the most infamous cases associated with the Wendigo legend took place in 1878, deep in the forests of Alberta, Canada. A man named Swift Runner, a Cree trapper, was well known and respected among his people. He had a family, a home, and a thriving life. But that winter, something changed. The winter of 1878 was brutal. Starvation loomed over many indigenous communities, and Swift Runner and his family were among those struggling to survive. But unlike others who persevered, he made a horrifying choice. When rescuers finally arrived at Swift Runner's cabin, they found something beyond comprehension. Bones were scattered across the frozen ground, some cracked open, the marrow sucked dry. The remains of his wife and children lay among them, their bodies stripped of flesh. Swift Runner, fully aware of what he had done, confessed. He told authorities that a dark presence had taken hold of him, something unnatural, something beyond hunger. He had become a Wendigo, Whether he truly believed this or was using the legend as an excuse for his monstrous crimes is unknown. But to his people, the explanation was clear. The Wendigo had claimed another victim. Swift Runner was put on trial and quickly sentenced to death. In December 1879, he was executed by hanging, the first official execution in Alberta's history. But long after his death, those who knew him whispered that the Wendigo had never truly left him. A hunter that cannot be escaped. The Wendigo is not a mindless beast. It is a predator that stalks its prey with intelligence and patience. It does not rush. It waits. It watches. It chooses the right moment to strike, ensuring that its victim is weak, alone, and utterly helpless. Those who have encountered the Wendigo say that they first felt a strange unease, an overwhelming sense that they were being watched. Then came the whispers, a voice, distant at first, calling their name from the darkness. Sometimes it sounded like a loved one, other times like a child crying for help. The Wendigo does not need to chase its prey. It lures them deeper into the woods, away from safety, until there is no turning back. And once you see it, it is already too late. The cursed hunger. The most terrifying ability of the Wendigo is its curse. Some believe that simply encountering a Wendigo is enough to infect the soul. Those who come too close may begin to experience unnatural cravings, a deep and growing hunger that no normal food can satisfy. They will begin to withdraw from others, their thoughts consumed by dark urges. And then, one day, they will hear the Wendigo's voice whispering to them, and they will know that they are becoming one, a creature of endless winter. The Wendigo is not bound by time or place. It does not age, does not die of natural causes, does not rest. It is eternal, a creature of hunger that exists beyond the realm of men. Some believe that it is a spirit, slipping between worlds, moving through the frozen forests like a shadow. Others think it is something far worse, something that was once human, but has become something beyond understanding. The only thing that is certain is this: when the cold sets in and the wind carries whispers through the trees, the Wendigo is near, and it is always, always hungry. Real-life Wendigo encounters and true horror stories. The Wendigo is often dismissed as just another legend, a cautionary tale told around campfires to ward off greed and cannibalism. But history tells a different story. There are those who claim the Wendigo is real, that it has been seen, heard, and even felt by those who dared venture too deep into the frozen wilderness. And some of these encounters are backed by terrifying historical evidence. The Wendigo psychosis of Swift Runner, 1878. One of the most infamous cases associated with the Wendigo legend took place in 1878, deep in the forests of Alberta, Canada. A man named Swift Runner, a Cree trapper, was well known and respected among his people. He had a family, a home, and a thriving life. But that winter, something changed. The winter of 1878 was brutal. Starvation loomed over many indigenous communities, and Swift Runner and his family were among those struggling to survive. But unlike others who persevered, he made a horrifying choice. When rescuers finally arrived at Swift Runner's cabin, they found something beyond comprehension. Bones were scattered across the frozen ground, some cracked open, the marrow sucked dry. The remains of his wife and children lay among them, their bodies stripped of flesh. Swift Runner, fully aware of what he had done, confessed. He told authorities that a dark presence had taken hold of him, something unnatural, something beyond hunger. He had become a Wendigo. Whether he truly believed this or was using the legend as an excuse for his monstrous crimes is unknown. But to his people, the explanation was clear. The Wendigo had claimed another victim. Swift Runner was put on trial and quickly sentenced to death. In December 1879, he was executed by hanging, the first official execution in Alberta's history. But long after his death, those who knew him whispered that the Wendigo had never truly left him. Jack Fiddler, the Wendigo killer. Swift Runner wasn't the only one to claim a connection to the Wendigo. In the early 1900s, a powerful Cree shaman named Jack Fiddler was said to have encountered the beast many times, and not only had he seen it, but he had also killed it. Jack Fiddler was no ordinary man. He and his brother Joseph were known as Wendigo hunters. According to their people, the Wendigo spirit did not just appear in the form of a monstrous creature. It could also possess a person, turning them into something inhuman. Jack Fiddler claimed that he had killed at least 14 Wendigos throughout his life. But the truth of his methods was far more disturbing. Many of those he killed were actually members of his own tribe, people who had fallen ill, become violent, or exhibited signs of the dreaded Wendigo transformation. Some were even killed at their own request, fearing they would become a danger to their families. But in 1907, Jack Fiddler's practices caught the attention of the Canadian authorities. He and his brother were arrested for murder. Fiddler, now an old man, did not wait for his trial. He escaped custody and took his own life in the wilderness. His brother Joseph was later sentenced to death, though he died in prison before his execution could be carried out. To this day, the Cree people tell stories of the Wendigo hunter, the man who fought against the darkness in the deep forests of Canada. But some believe that the Wendigo cannot truly be killed, that it only moves, waiting for another winter, another hunger, another soul to claim. Modern encounters. The Wendigo in the 21st century. Though many consider the Wendigo to be nothing more than folklore, there are still those who claim to have seen it. Stories of a skeletal figure lurking in the trees, a presence that follows but never reveals itself fully. In 2019, a hunter in northern Minnesota reported hearing a voice in the woods calling his name. When he turned, he saw something tall and thin, its glowing eyes locked onto him from the tree line. The figure vanished into the snow, leaving behind deep, clawed footprints. In 2008, a group of hikers in Ontario claimed they were pursued by something that mimicked their voices, calling to them in the exact tone and cadence of their friends. When they tried to run, one of them swore they saw a gaunt, gray-skinned creature watching from a ridge, its mouth stretched into a silent scream. In isolated communities of Canada and the northern US, there are still whispers of the Wendigo, of hunters who disappear, of shadows that do not belong to any living creature. Some believe that the Wendigo is simply a manifestation of extreme isolation and paranoia. Others believe it is real. But whether it is a creature of the mind or a monster of the flesh, one thing is certain. The legend of the Wendigo has never faded. And as long as the cold winds blow and the forests stand, it will remain, watching from the shadows, waiting for the next lost soul to claim. The Wendigo psychosis, the mind consumed by hunger. The legend of the Wendigo is terrifying enough as folklore, but what makes it even more chilling is that it has been linked to real psychological conditions. Cases where people believed they were transforming into the very creature they feared. This phenomenon is known as Wendigo psychosis, a rare but horrifying disorder that has been documented among indigenous communities in North America. Those afflicted claim to feel an overwhelming, unnatural craving for human flesh. Some report hearing voices whispering to them, urging them to kill and consume their loved ones. Their bodies weaken, their minds slip into a fog, and soon they become convinced that they are no longer human at all, that the Wendigo has taken hold of them. A condition born from starvation and isolation. Wendigo psychosis has fascinated anthropologists, psychologists, and historians for over a century. Though extremely rare, it has been reported in cases where individuals were cut off from civilization, exposed to harsh winter conditions, and forced to endure prolonged starvation. The first recorded cases of Wendigo psychosis date back to the 1600s, when European explorers began documenting the beliefs and traditions of indigenous North American tribes. Jesuit missionaries wrote of individuals who, despite having access to food, claimed they were possessed by an evil spirit that made them crave human flesh. Doctors and researchers have since debated whether Wendigo psychosis is a cultural phenomenon, something deeply tied to the fears and folklore of indigenous communities, or whether it is a genuine psychological disorder brought on by extreme conditions. The stages of the Wendigo curse. For those who believe in Wendigo psychosis, the transformation is not immediate. It begins subtly, creeping into the mind like an infection. The whispering hunger. The first symptom is an increasing obsession with hunger. Normal food no longer satisfies. The afflicted begin to feel weak, their bodies rejecting even the richest meals. The voice in the dark. Soon, they begin to hear something. A voice, distant at first, then closer. It speaks to them, urges them. Some say it sounds like a loved one calling their name. Others describe it as something inhuman, hollow, rasping. The breaking point. Their physical appearance begins to change. They lose weight rapidly. Their skin stretches tight over their bones. Their eyes sink deep into their skulls. In extreme cases, their teeth become jagged from grinding and gnashing. Their fingernails grow sharp from clawing at their own flesh. The transformation. At this stage, they no longer believe they are human. They may turn violent, lashing out at those around them. If their descent is not stopped, they will kill. They will eat. And once they have tasted human flesh, there is no going back. Scientific theories behind Wendigo psychosis. Modern psychologists and anthropologists have attempted to explain Wendigo psychosis through scientific and medical lenses. Some believe that it is linked to a combination of severe malnutrition and starvation, which can cause extreme hallucinations and mental breaks. Social isolation, which can lead to psychosis, paranoia, and dissociation. Cultural conditioning, where the fear of the Wendigo is so ingrained that individuals convince themselves they are becoming one. Others believe that it is related to pre-existing mental illnesses, such as schizophrenia or dissociative identity disorder, triggered by the extreme stress of survival in an unforgiving environment. But despite these theories, no medical explanation has ever fully captured the terror that those afflicted by Wendigo psychosis describe. The case of the Hudson Bay fur traders. One of the most chilling historical reports of Wendigo psychosis came from Hudson Bay Company fur traders in the 1800s. These traders worked deep in the wilderness, often alone or in small groups, living through brutal winters with limited supplies. Records tell of men who began acting strangely, growing distant, refusing to eat, complaining of voices whispering to them in the dead of night. Some spoke of a deep, overwhelming hunger that gnawed at them, despite having food. Then, the disappearances began. In some cases, when the bodies were eventually found, they had been stripped of flesh, gnawed clean to the bone. Other times, the afflicted were caught before they could kill, but they would scream and thrash, claiming they were no longer themselves, that the Wendigo had taken them. The Hudson Bay Company had a chilling method of dealing with such cases. They did not attempt to cure the afflicted. They executed them on the spot. To this day, records of Wendigo psychosis cases remain in old fur trade journals, hidden away in archives, a dark reminder that even the most rational men can succumb to the primal horrors of the wilderness. The blurred line. between myth and madness. Wendigo psychosis raises an unsettling question. Is the Wendigo simply a legend, or is it something more? Is it a supernatural curse, taking hold of those who have strayed too far into the abyss? Or is it a product of the human mind, a warning of what happens when starvation and madness push someone beyond the limits of sanity? Even today, there are whispers, stories of people in remote northern communities who begin acting strangely during long winters, muttering about hunger, losing weight despite having food, speaking of voices calling them into the woods. Some are taken to hospitals, some disappear, and some, they say, are never seen again. The Wendigo in pop culture, the evolution of fear. The Wendigo legend has survived for centuries, passed down through oral traditions and whispered around campfires. But in the modern age, this terrifying entity has found a new home on the pages of horror novels, in the frames of terrifying films, and lurking in the dark corners of video games. What was once a legend told by indigenous tribes has now transformed into an icon of horror, evolving with each retelling, each adaptation, and each new medium it inhabits. Its core themes resonate with audiences in different ways. Survival horror, the idea of being alone in the wilderness, stalked by something unseen, taps into one of humanity's oldest fears. Psychological horror, the fear of losing oneself, of becoming something monstrous, is just as terrifying as being hunted. Moral horror, the Wendigo forces us to confront the darkest corners of human nature. What would we do to survive? How far would we go before we lost our humanity? The legend of the Wendigo is timeless because it speaks to something primal. No matter how much civilization advances, no matter how far we distance ourselves from our ancestors, the fear of the Wendigo lingers. Because deep down, we all know that hunger, true, desperate hunger, can change a person. And once that change begins, there is no going back. Could the Wendigo be real? Cryptid, demon, or folklore? The Wendigo has haunted the legends of North America for centuries, but is there any truth behind the tales? Could there really be something lurking in the forests? Something ancient? Something cursed? While many dismiss the Wendigo as mere folklore, others believe there is more to the legend than just stories meant to frighten children. Some claim it is a cryptid, an undiscovered predator that has evaded scientific detection. Others believe it to be a supernatural entity, something not of this world, a being of pure hunger and evil. And then there are those who wonder if the Wendigo is something even more terrifying, not a creature of flesh and blood, but a force of the human mind, a shadow born from fear itself. The cryptid theory, a real creature in the wilderness. Some researchers speculate that the Wendigo legend could be based on encounters with an actual, unidentified creature that roams the dense forests of Canada and the northern United States. Reports of tall, thin, humanoid figures with glowing eyes have surfaced for years, descriptions that eerily match the Wendigo. If such a creature exists, what could it be? An undiscovered predator? Could there be a species of predator so elusive, so adapted to the wilderness, that it has remained hidden for centuries? If the Wendigo is real, it would have to be something beyond our understanding, something that hunts in silence, only leaving behind rumors and fear, a deformed or diseased human. Some believe that Wendigo sightings could be cases of severely malnourished individuals suffering from extreme starvation or mental illness. A lone wanderer, skeletal and desperate, could certainly be mistaken for something unnatural in the right circumstances, a relic of the past. Others wonder if the Wendigo could be a remnant of an ancient species, a holdover from a time when humans were not the only intelligent predators. Could something like this have once existed, only to be forgotten, except in whispered warnings. The supernatural entity theory, a demon of the cold. To many indigenous tribes, the Wendigo is not just a beast, it is a spirit. It is not something that simply exists in the physical world. Rather, it is an entity that moves between worlds, a force that possesses the desperate and the greedy, twisting them into monsters. Could the Wendigo be something more than flesh and blood? A cursed spirit? Many traditional stories state that the Wendigo was once human, but was cursed after committing an unforgivable act, usually cannibalism. This suggests that the Wendigo is not born, but made, a possessing entity. Some tribes describe the Wendigo as an evil spirit that takes hold of a person, warping their body and mind. This would explain the stories of Wendigo psychosis. Perhaps those who suffered from it were not simply sick, but possessed. An omen of death. Like the Grim Reaper or the Mothman, some believe that the Wendigo is not a killer itself, but a harbinger. Seeing one means death is near, whether by starvation, madness, or some other grim fate. The Tulpa theory, a creature made real by fear. There is a strange belief in paranormal circles that creatures like the Wendigo can be tulpas, beings created by collective belief. The idea is that if enough people fear something, if enough people think about it, that thought can take on a life of its own. Could the Wendigo be one of these entities? If generations of people have feared the Wendigo, told stories about it, warned each other of its presence, could that fear have given it power? Could it have transformed the legend from mere words into something that now walks the frozen forests, hungry and waiting? The psychological theory, a monster of the mind. The Wendigo legend is deeply tied to starvation, isolation, and madness. Some believe that every sighting, every story, can be explained through the fragile state of the human mind. Starvation-induced hallucinations. The human brain is not designed to function without food. Extreme hunger can cause confusion, paranoia, and even vivid hallucinations. Could those who have seen the Wendigo have been suffering from starvation-induced psychosis? The effects of isolation. Many reports of the Wendigo come from people who have spent long periods alone in the wilderness. When humans are isolated for too long, their minds begin to turn against them. The feeling of being watched, the whispers in the wind, the sensation that something is following you. It could all be the result of a breaking psyche. Fear feeding fear. Once someone believes the Wendigo is real, their fear can become a self-fulfilling prophecy. The rustling in the trees, the snap of a branch, the shape in the shadows, everything becomes proof that the Wendigo is near. The mind, desperate for an answer, creates the monster, the missing person's connection. Could the Wendigo be hunting? Perhaps the most chilling aspect of the Wendigo legend is how eerily it aligns with real-life missing persons cases. In the remote forests of Canada and the northern United States, people disappear without a trace every year. Some are hikers, some are hunters, some are entire groups that vanish without explanation, and sometimes, when bodies are found, they are missing something vital, their flesh. Could the Wendigo be responsible? Some theorists point to cases where experienced outdoorsmen have gone missing in places where they should have survived. Their remains, when found, sometimes show signs of predation, but not by any known animal. Could there be something in the woods? Something ancient, something that does not belong to the world of men? Final thoughts. Legend or reality? The Wendigo exists, if not in the world, then in the mind. It is a creature that embodies our deepest fears: starvation, madness, isolation, the loss of humanity. Whether it is a real predator lurking in the forests, a malevolent spirit, or a manifestation of the human condition, one thing is undeniable. People have seen it, people have felt it, and people have feared it for centuries. The Wendigo does not need proof to exist. It is real in the way that all true horrors are real, felt in the deepest, coldest places of the world, where the wind howls through the trees and the night is endless. And when the hunger comes, when the isolation sets in, when the cold gnaws at your bones, you may begin to understand, and you may begin to hear it whispering your name. Conclusion: the endless hunger. The Wendigo is more than a legend. It is a force, an idea, a fear that has persisted for centuries. It has slithered its way into folklore, into psychology, into modern horror, and into the minds of those who have dared to speak its name. Whether it exists as flesh, as spirit, or as something trapped between the two, one thing is certain: the Wendigo never fades. Because hunger never fades, because the cold never fades, because fear, above all else, never fades. The Wendigo does not need to be real in a traditional sense to hold power. It does not need to be seen in the woods to be felt in the mind. The greatest horror is not in the creature itself, but in what it represents: the slow decay of humanity when all else is lost, the terrifying truth that even the strongest will can crumble when faced with desperation. It is easy to dismiss the Wendigo as just another story, another ghost tale to scare children into behaving. But step into the wilderness, where the snow is deep and the air is thin, where no living soul can hear your screams, and you may find yourself reconsidering the lingering presence of the Wendigo. Imagine this: you are lost in the woods. The sky has turned dark, the wind is howling, and the trees stretch endlessly in all directions. You are alone, or so you think. At first, it is just a sensation. The hair on your arms rises, an inexplicable chill runs down your spine, and your instincts, primal, ancient, unexplainable, begin to scream at you to move, to run, to flee, but there is nowhere to run. And then you hear it, a whisper, a faint rasping voice calling your name, drifting through the frozen air. It is distant at first, barely a breath, but then it comes again and again, growing closer each time, until it feels as though it is right behind you. You turn, there is nothing there, but the trees do not feel empty anymore. Somewhere in the dark, something is watching. You move faster now, your breath quickening, your heart pounding against your ribs. You do not know why. You have seen nothing, but the fear is there, rising like bile in your throat. And then the hunger begins. Your stomach clenches, hollow and aching, as if you have not eaten in days. The hunger is deep, raw, a gnawing thing that grows stronger with every step. It does not make sense. You ate before you left. You were fine. But now you are starving. Your legs feel weak. Your thoughts begin to blur. You try to push forward, but something is wrong. The forest seems endless now, as if it has stretched, shifting and twisting so that no matter how far you go, you are still in the same place. The hunger deepens, and then you see it. At first, it is just a shape in the shadows, tall, impossibly thin, unmoving. But as your vision clears, as the wind pulls back the veil of frost, the shape steps forward, a gaunt, skeletal figure, eyes like burning embers, skin stretched too tight over a body that should not be alive. The Wendigo has found you, and as you stand there, frozen, breathless, lost in the endless cold, you suddenly understand why no one ever escapes. A horror that lives in the mind. The Wendigo's power is not just in its physical form. Its true terror lies in what it represents: the ultimate loss of control, the descent into madness, the moment when a person is no longer a person, but something else entirely. For centuries, people have feared what lurks in the dark, But the Wendigo is more than just a creature waiting in the woods. It is the hunger that cannot be satisfied, the loneliness that breaks a man's mind, the whispers that convince him to do the unthinkable. It is the thing we all fear, deep in our bones, ourselves. The cycle of fear. The Wendigo has survived for generations because it is not bound by time. It is not a creature that can be hunted to extinction, not a ghost that can be exorcised. It is an idea, a warning, an entity that thrives wherever fear and hunger intersect. And so the stories continue. A hunter in the frozen wilderness who disappears without a trace. A hiker who swears she heard her own voice calling her from the trees. A missing persons case, the body found stripped of flesh, the bones gnawed clean. Again and again and again, each new winter, the Wendigo rises. Each new soul, it hungers. A final warning. Many believe that speaking of the Wendigo invites its presence, that to utter its name is to call it forth, to mark oneself as prey. Whether that is true or not, the legend remains. It whispers through the trees, through the frozen wind, through the empty spaces where the light does not reach. And so, if you ever find yourself alone in the wilderness, and the night grows too quiet, and the shadows seem to stretch in ways they should not, if you hear your name, spoken in a voice you recognize but do not trust, do not look. Do not listen. Run, because the Wendigo is always hungry, and you, my friend, are nothing more than its next meal.